I'm getting to the money. You ain't doing nothing for me. So it's forever and getting money. Probably got a girl and a couple slides. Oh, you don't want no more boy, but don't need to see your crib, mine. I ain't the one to go when I'm on your mind. Oh yeah, that's big facts. I'm tired of hearing where your man at. I'm single and unavailable. I don't even know where they be waiting for. Cause I can't be wasting my time. Just be sounding like lies. Oh, I can't be one of your sides. I know this hurts your pride when I'm screaming out. Get money. Every time you say you love me, I be saying get money. Get money. I be on it. Cause I'm getting to the money. You ain't doing nothing for me. So it's forever and get money.
All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy Monday rolling out. Happy Monday from Crystal with Love XO. I see my people are here and my people are ready for tonight's conversation with Blake from Ready to Love. If you guys were watching on Friday, we had Sue-Ann, and Sue-Ann, we had some issues with her audio. She was also finishing up another interview and was a little bit late. So as a result, we didn't really get to get into things the way we usually do. And so what I'm hoping is that some of the questions that we were not able to get to with Sue-Ann will be able to answer as Blake drops in. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. Thank you guys for coming. I see he's already suited and booted, looking very handsome. We're going to go ahead and welcome Blake. Welcome, Blake.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. Well, thank you, first of all, for hanging out on a Monday evening with us, talking about all things Ready to Love. The chat is excited to have you here, and I'm glad that you accepted the offer to come out and hang out with us. So thank you for that.
Definitely.
Well, and you look very nice. I like the little rose. I feel that. I like that.
Thank you. That's my little signature right there. That's my signature.
Okay. I'm not mad at this signature. All right. Mimi says, hey, Blake. All right. We got Blake in the building. Well, first of all, I want to ask you, Blake, before we get into all the other stuff, what made you sign up for Ready to Love?
So I actually didn't sign up for Ready to Love. I got a call from the producers.
Okay.
And I actually thought it was a crank call. So I hung up and, they called me back and was like, no, this is a real thing. And, they kind of talked to me and I told them, I wasn't really interested. I'm not really a social media person.
Okay.
But after talking with, my friends and, the people in my circle, they said, you know what, you might as well just give it a try. At a minimum, you can check the box and say it's something that you've done. So I decided to be open-minded and I went with it.
Okay. So had you been single for a while for your friends to say you should give it a try? Were you actively like dating and out there, or what was going on with your love life?
Not really. I got out of my last relationship in 2019.
Okay.
And, ever since I've just been kind of, living. I lived in Houston and I went to Florida, and I have been in Florida for about 3 years. I still live between the two. COVID happened, and when COVID happened, everybody's life shut down. It was just really chill. So I wouldn't say that I wasn't dating, but I'll say that I wasn't looking for anything.
Okay. Now we know you've been married before and you have children. So what is like, if you could like script out, which I believe that all of us can, I believe that we can write our own happily ever after. But if you could say where you wanted to be in your life, would you see yourself married? Would you see yourself with just a long-term partner? Or what is your ultimate, like, Blake's perfect ending to his love life?
So I love the question. We're going to get right to it, right? So I think for me, I've been married. Like you said, I already have kids. So those boxes are checked for me. For me, it's about having the freedom and the ability to do whatever, it is that we want to do, right? So
Mhm.
making sure that I assist my partner in being in a position where we can go at any time and we can do it anytime, and we have the freedom to do whatever comes to mind. And
Okay.
that's pretty much the goal, right? But it takes the right person to be able to trust that you can lead, to show that those things are possible, and to show them how they can actually achieve those things. And
Mhm.
that becomes the challenge of dating for me.
Okay. Okay. So if you found a person and you guys, had great chemistry, um, but she did not want to get married, you'd be cool with that.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I don't think marriage is the end all be all. I
Okay.
think marriage is just it just signifies to the outside world, what your commitment is. But in the new day and age of social media, I think your social media is really gonna, dictate what your relationship is. So I'm
Right.
not opposed to it. I can go either way with it, to be honest with you.
Okay, okay, that's fair. So the chat has asked, can they ask questions? Yes, you guys can ask questions. Let me talk a little bit more to Blake, and then I'll definitely take questions because the ladies have questions for you, Blake. Let's go back before we get into what happened on the show with marriage. I know, for me, I'm someone that has been married before, and I'm not gonna lie, Blake, I definitely did not want to get married again. I was married and had children. And I definitely wasn't having more children. So I could relate to what you were talking about. There are a lot of people at a certain point in their life that aren't looking to have children. And then you have a lot of people that are. So it's kind of, I remember when I would date when I was single, after I was divorced, some guys did not want to date women with children. And that sometimes would hurt my feelings. And then some of them would want to date a woman that was open to having children. And that
Right.
automatically ruled me out. But I had to learn that that's just like, okay, that means they're not for me. It's not a bad thing. So for you, can you tell us a little bit about what caused your marriage to end and what headspace you were in after that relationship ended?
Definitely, definitely. I think for me, I think, when you're young, you have a lot of ideas of what you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
but you really don't know why you're supposed to do them,
Hmm.
right? So you wind up doing things maybe in your late 20s, early 30s, that you look back on when you're in your 40s, after you've kind of found yourself and you discover things that you're like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't the best decision.
Hmm.
My ex-wife is a great woman. She's amazing. She's phenomenal. But there were things that we never discussed to make sure that we wanted when it came time to aligning for end of life, right? When
Okay.
you meet somebody and you're young, you're thinking about right now. You're
Hmm.
not really thinking about what that picture is going to look like 20, 30, or 40 years from now. So
Right.
it's important, if I could say anything about it, as you're falling in love right now, you still got to figure out 20 or 30 years from now, do you guys want the same end goal?
Yeah.
Because, what you're doing today won't be the same thing that you're doing 5, 7, and 10 years from now.
Right. Right. That's true, but that's hard to think about when you're young. You're just like
Yeah.
excited. How old were you when you got married?
Oof. I was actually I was early 30s. So I think I was about 34.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was about 34. It's about 11 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. 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 So let's look at the show before we get into like the every little thing that happened. Watching this show, because for
Mhm.
someone that's not really into social media and is not really, keyed into that, how has this experience been watching yourself, hearing other people talk about, get feedback and feel like they know you from the snippets that they've seen on television? How has this experience been?
So I'm going to be fully transparent. I've only seen episodes 1 and 2, right? I haven't watched any other episodes because once I
Okay.
saw episodes 1 and 2, and I realized it wasn't really depicting me for who I am,
Okay.
and they weren't allowing me to speak, and I recognized that they were trying to create a character. I understood what it was, and it was for entertainment value. It
Okay.
was definitely very interesting to watch people pop up on the internet and say that they knew me, or say that they had come across me, or that they dated me, right? Um, that part I wasn't really expecting. Don't know these people, have no clue who they are,
Oh
but
wow.
I also understand that it comes with the territory, right? So you're going to get love and hate in everything that you do,
Right.
right? I'm the type of person that I only focus on the positive. So I really don't give the negative too much mind. And I really don't watch the blogs, to be honest with you. Everything that I hear is from people that will, in my circle, right? The
Okay.
family members and the friends, always the women who are like, let me tell you what I just saw, right?
Right.
And I'm like, why are you worried about it? So For me, it was interesting to see. It was a good experience to say. If you look at it from like an experience standpoint of
Okay.
having done the activity, it was fun. You got to meet some really cool people.
Hmm.
But it definitely wasn't something that I look at and I can say, yeah, they did a really good job of allowing me to be me and allowing people to see who I am.
Okay. Okay. So you just cleared up one of the questions I had for later down the line. So the lady that came out and said you were her ex, you don't know who that woman is.
So I don't even know who that is. I have no clue who that is. I don't know how people, kind of jumped on that and took it. I mean, there was no fact to anything that was said.
Hmm.
The person didn't say who they were. I found it a little, disheartening, but it was very convenient
Yeah.
that it came up at the same time that the Jeffrey thing came up, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate, but I'm assuming it was a little energy that came from that where
Yes.
someone wanted to paint a picture that
Yeah.
just wasn't accurate of who I am.
Okay. Okay, well let's start there because there's a lot that happened on the show and I want to say, we watch the show through the edit, right?
Mhm.
And so there's questions that we have or maybe things trigger us based on what we've seen, which is why I'm always thankful when people come on to kind of straighten it out. And most of the time people say, "Hey, what you guys saw is not a true depiction of me." Some people say, yeah, that's me.
Right,
But
right,
it's always good for you to be able to come and people to hear it from the horse's mouth. So let's start with the situation with Jeffrey, because that was one of the first red flags for your character, for her to come out and say, hey, he's
right,
been pressuring me not to date anyone else. He's been, basically like, she actually like said low key stalking, like it's very, very uncomfortable. And you
right,
seem very taken aback, from that. And that actually, her making that accusation actually caused friction between her and Suanne.
right.
So let's go back to you and Jeffrey, because we never really saw you guys' connection. So what was the connection, if there was one, and where did that conversation come from that she shared?
So, like I said, I try and stay on the positive side. And
Mhm.
what I will say is, by the time Jeffrey made that comment, it was only day two, right? So
Oh,
that's the part that people don't understand. They make it seem like a lot of time has passed. It was day two. And my connection, another connection that I had that was as strong as Cynthia that they didn't, I'm sorry, that was as strong as Suanne that they didn't show was
okay.
Cynthia. If you look at like the boat episodes and stuff, you'll see I had two bags, right? I was
Mhm.
courting both women at the same time. When
Wow.
Cynthia approached me to have the conversation, I was actually sitting with Jeffrey
Mhm.
on day two and we had to talk. And Jeffrey came behind me and she scratched me down my back. So I
Mhm.
turned and I asked if she wanted to join the conversation.
Okay.
And she said no, she didn't. And I think Cynthia made a comment, when she said she was going to walk around. And after that happened and we, started to wrap up, I pulled her to the side and I was like, look, you put me in a situation. It was a little uncomfortable for me. We're here to get to know people. And, she was like, you can't tell me how to feel, which I respected. I
Mhm.
said, okay. For me, it was just like, all right, well, this won't be the direction that I go. And
Mhm.
then the next day, I get this, information about her being in a women's lounge, giving all this information saying that I said these things that
Mhm.
weren't true at all. So, I don't know what the motivation was. I think that things played out, well enough that everyone can kind of assume that, it wasn't said. I did make an attempt to talk to her to clear the air, but,
Mhm.
she didn't want to have that conversation either. So I really can't speculate why she did what she did. Maybe I offended her. Maybe I rubbed her the wrong way. I don't know.
Wow. That is wild. Someone asked earlier, what was it about? Because Jeffrey, there's been issues throughout the show with different people, right? With you initially, she didn't want to bring an ex on. That was a
Right,
little strange, and then of course her going back and forth with Suanne.
right,
Um, uh, what was but one thing that does stand about Jeffrey is a lot of the guys really seem to be very attracted to her. She seems to have a like a magnetic pull that attracts the guys in. We see, she has quite a few connections. Can you share, let's start with that. What
okay.
was it about the women that you did have a connection with? What did you like about the women? So let's say Jeffrey, Cynthia, and Suanne. What was it about each of them that you were
So I
attracted?
didn't have a connection with Jeffrey.
Oh, so there
I had
wasn't.
a conversation with Jeffrey. I had a
Gotcha.
conversation with Jeffrey. Never had a connection with Jeffrey.
Okay.
Um, for me, Cynthia and Suanne they were down to earth and
Okay.
they were pretty much transparent
Mm-hmm.
and they did not have an act, right? They weren't trying to portray a particular persona.
Mm-hmm.
What I got from them was the ability to laugh and joke, to not take, life too serious and not take themselves too serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we
Mm-hmm.
can't laugh and we can't joke, then we're probably just not aligned.
Yeah.
Um, I think that Jeffrey just had a different approach. I think that Jeffrey, you know, shout out to Jeffrey for what she does. At least she's been consistent all the way through. So I will give her that.
Yeah.
Um, her approach was a little different to be a little bit more attentive to, I guess, what she thought the guys needed.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm a little older. That doesn't really work for me, right? I want to know who you are. I don't
Okay.
want you to be who you think I need you to be.
Right. 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 We saw that even with your conversation with Jonique. It seemed like when I watched the conversation between you and Jonique, it seemed like she was a lot younger than you, and you
Right.
were just kind of like, yeah, this isn't going to work. It's like
So
it seemed like
that
that.
one, that one, I'm gonna blame on editing. I mean, I know Jonique has had her own, feelings over it. I
Mhm.
have no ill will towards Jonique. I think she's a wonderful young lady, but like you pointed out, I think there's like 15 years between Jonique and I, right? So
Mhm.
the reality is she's closer to my son's age than she is to my age,
Yeah.
right? So trying to hold the conversation um, and find that middle ground becomes challenging. But I will say that it was not as uncomfortable as editing made it seem,
Okay.
right? So we definitely had a conversation. I mean, it was a very talkative conversation for the hour date, but
Mhm.
I think editing just leaned a little too far in on, what they wanted to present as far as the distance between us and trying to bridge it.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. All right, so let's go there. You mentioned that there's the age gap. What are you usually attracted to? Blake, what type of woman? Because coming on the show, you obviously have there's a lot of different looks, there's a lot of different personalities, there's a lot
Mhm.
of different ages. Mimi says, what is your ideal life partner? What does that look like for you? Can you give us a kind of a snapshot of what you are attracted to?
So I mean, just to be transparent and honest, that's really hard for me because I'm an energy person, right? So at the
Right.
end of the day, I'm still a man, and I
Right.
still like what I find attractive. But
Hmm.
you could be gorgeous with no energy, and it wouldn't work for me. Or you could be high energy and maybe wouldn't be someone that the people on the outside would assume I would be with,
Hmm.
that I would still be with. So I don't really have a type per se, other than, being open minded,
Okay.
being fun and being able to hold the conversation. Look, we all have different backgrounds, we come from different places, we have different experiences. And if we can't talk about those things
Yeah.
without judging the next person or feeling like, we're offended by what someone says,
Hmm.
we're probably not going to be able to, connect on that level.
Yeah. Yeah, what you did say, you are a man, and we do know that men have to be physically attracted, right?
Mhm.
So when you walked in the room for the mixer, I mean, Miami, you guys definitely everything was out at that
Don't
moment.
do this to me. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me.
Well, we want to know, Blake,
Don't do this to me.
who did your eye gravitate to initially? Just from not energy, just physical attraction. He looks so uncomfortable.
So I think that when I started the process, I
Hmm.
was trusting that production and the concept of the show was going to choose people for me that I probably would not have selected for myself.
Okay.
So I came in this being open-minded to say, okay, well, let me open my mind and look at things from a lens that I probably wouldn't look at, if I was out somewhere and I came across someone or
Okay.
something like that. So
Mhm.
I can't really answer that question for you because that wasn't, the way I came into the
Okay.
mixer.
Okay, Blake, that was good. That was very good. I am a publicist by nature, and that was a very good answer.
I mean,
That was
look,
a good answer.
all of the women are beautiful, for what they are, right?
Yeah,
But everything isn't for everybody.
true.
Right.
True.
So that's really all it is. It really has nothing to do with the women or any of those
Yeah,
things. They all had great attributes about them.
right.
They all had things that would make you, do a double take. But unfortunately for me, I need a little bit more than just the initial passing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, that.
Millions of attractive women in the world,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everybody's for you.
Can you give us your celebrity crush? Like, who is your ideal?
You're about to make me date myself. Um, my ideal. Back in the day,
Hmm.
back in the day, And I'm only saying back in the day because, quite honestly, I don't follow too much of the current like celebrity stuff,
Okay.
movie stuff. I can't name actors or actresses. But
Yeah.
back in the day, Fancy
Ah,
from
Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
Chris O'Play.
I was crazy about Fancy back in the day. It's crazy about
Okay,
Fancy.
okay. Fancy maybe.
Stacey Dash was cute too, but she's on the other side of the spectrum. But
Yeah.
she didn't move me the way Fancy moved me. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like Stacey Dash was cute, but Fancy moved me.
Okay. I'm not mad at that. My celebrity crush is Denzel Washington, so that definitely dates me. But I'm gonna
That's everybody's celebrity crush. Like that
it
doesn't
still
count.
stands though. I mean, it stands, Blake. He's still
Okay.
he's that one. But okay, so no, I appreciate that. And that's there's a little diversity there, but I also appreciate the fact that you're saying, as a man, after you mature, you realize you need a little bit more than just that. So looks are
Right.
great, but you also want something else. How old is your oldest child? People are asking.
23.
23. Okay, so yeah, so he's a grown man, but
Yep. Very
okay.
much so.
Oh, that's interesting. What did your son say? What did your son say about you being on the show? Did he have any feedback?
So he thought it was funny because he said he didn't know the person that, they were showing.
Hmm.
So he wasn't as interested in the show as he was in like the blogs and the gossip, right? That was more interesting to him than actually watching the show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, understandable. Understandable.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do your children? How you have two sons, right?
3 boys.
Three boys. Okay. Do
Three
they
boys.
want you to be in a relationship, or are they kind of like, hey,
They're boys. Look, they're boys. Boys don't care. Boys don't feed into the fairy tale. They don't care. Look, they want what they want. As long as they're getting what they want, they're happy.
they're
So,
happy?
I don't think my sons have ever cared
Yeah.
about my dating life.
Okay. That's real. That's boys. Boys are different. What is the biggest takeaway that you have learned being a father? What has been the biggest lesson that you've learned from raising your boys?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is how to mature as a man
Mm-hmm.
and looking at, what I would identify as masculinity, right? And being that example for my boys. So if you take a situation like a Jeffrey or you take a situation like a Morgan,
Mm-hmm.
right? Did I handle the situations in the same way that I would instruct my sons to handle those situations if
Yeah.
they came from school and said, Dad, this girl cursed me out at school,
Yeah.
right? What
Yeah.
did you do? How did you handle it, right? So I think that really made me identify, within myself and be intentional within myself on how I choose to move and how I choose to operate in certain situations.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely fair, and I'm sure not easy to do, and probably not easy to teach.
It's not.
um,
I will say that I'm much better at it with my younger two sons than my first son. My first son saw me at my growing phase of getting to that point.
yeah.
But, now that we're here, everyone understands it and it works out well.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Morgan situation. I'm gonna say, I interview castmates every week.
Mhm.
And that episode where, you guys had that conversation, went and sat down, and she basically said you were like a cancer. It was really shocking. I think people were really taken aback. Like, where would that type of vitriol come from for someone that hasn't done anything necessarily to you? So were you shocked at that interaction? Because it seemed like you weren't ready for it, but it also seemed like you handled it well and immediately like got out of the situation. Like, okay, well, we don't have to keep doing this. But were you shocked? Did you know that she had that type of energy towards you? Where did that come from?
So yes, I was shocked that she had that type of energy towards me, but I was not shocked that she had that type of energy. I think that so if you've been following the story and you've been following like the real life for Jeffrey and Morgan, they're actually really, really close. They've become best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a part of it was her trying to ride for her friend, probably based off the way that I made her feel, because she and I had never had an interaction
Right.
other than the initial interaction, which I think she may have taken offense to, which is what I tried to sit down and have the conversation with her over.
Mm-hmm.
And that was over day one. I was, we're there, we're mingling, right? So we're trying to figure out who aligns with us, who doesn't, what's an option, what's not an option.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to her just about the having kids thing, because she said having kids for her was a definite. She said she would not date a man that was not going to give her a kid. She said she wouldn't fall in love with the man. I'm sorry, correction.
Right.
She would not fall in love with the man that wasn't going to give her a kid, which, I respect, right? Everybody is entitled to what it is that she wants, but I'm still trying to figure out who you are.
Right.
So I proceeded to ask her, do you have a point in your life or an age in your life, perhaps, where if it doesn't happen, that you would be open to, having a life without kids? She
Mm-hmm.
said no. So I said, okay, well, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you. I said, God forbid you turn 50 and you don't have kids. Are you saying that you would only date a man that's going to give you a child?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I guess she took offense to that. And,
Yeah.
it was an issue. So when I sat down with her, I tried to apologize for, how I made her feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she said, well, how can you apologize if you don't know what you did? And I
Yeah.
tried to explain, right, that nothing I did was intended to give her the feeling that she was feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
if she could let me know which part she took offense to, then I could apologize. But I don't think she really heard any of that. I think she was already
Yeah.
locked, cocked, and ready to rock. I think she knew what she wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
She was just waiting for that window because it was a really decent conversation before she decided to just go all the way left.
Yeah. Let me just ask you this, because that's the issue started early on, like at that mixer, right? With the
Mhm.
ladies with the children. Even Corbeya had a huge response to that. Were you surprised? And then looking back, if you could look back and maybe word your statements a little differently, because that was a sensitive topic and a sensitive point for quite a few of the women.
Right.
Like I said, for me, as someone who has already had children and has had her feelings hurt dating before, I got what you were saying. But when you
Right.
look back at it and seeing how it affected the response that it got from several of the ladies, do you wish you would maybe worded what you were saying a little differently?
So there's a couple things there. So hear me all the way out here before you crucify me. Um, there was only two women who felt that way,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, no, I don't feel like I should have said it any differently.
Okay.
And it's not to be disrespectful to them. I'm finding that like in this new age, in this new world of dating, we don't have lines or categories for our dating, right? I think that we're in a place where a woman is like, regardless of the age, I'm attracted to you. So you should want what I want out of life too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not realistic. Like when you're just starting your life, if you decide you want to date an older man, you have to at least give leeway and some respect to what that man has been through and what he's already accomplished and where he is. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely don't apologize for, how I feel about the situation. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that again, this was a situation where production cut up a conversation to give a particular image because the conversation that was actually had was about single parents raising children.
Right.
That's what it was about. And it was about whether or not I would have another child as a single parent, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And that's when I was like, no, I'm 87% sure that I wouldn't. But
Mm-hmm.
they kind of cut it and chopped it to make it, just for entertainment value, which I'm not mad at, right? You're on a show, they have creative rights. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that it's kind of split. People feel, I think, let me ask you this,
Mhm.
because it's easy to say that. I get what you're saying. And I think one of your castmates came on and said Blake is one of them kind of people that is genuine, but he's going to say what he thinks and it may come out a little blunt, right?
Right.
That's who he is. So I get that. But I think that, and I even, the statement Marriott is saying, why'd you call children of single parents broken?
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I understand where you're coming from, but you got to
Right.
realize, even with the people that are there,
Right.
probably most of them come from or a lot of them have come from single parent families, or maybe even be raising children on their own. So do you think that statement might have been a little bit, just a little
So
blunt?
the problem with that statement that I find is that when it came out, there were lots of discussions and, had some women saying, well, how should Blake have reworded it?
Yeah.
And no one had a way that I should reword it to make it acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the way that I process it, sometimes it's not the way we say things, it's the message. Sometimes we just don't like the message, right?
Right.
We can say a broken relationship and nobody thinks twice about a broken relationship. But
Mm-hmm.
then if you say, well, a broken relationship creates a broken child,
Yeah.
well, now people get offensive, right? And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with the child. It's not to say that the child isn't receiving any love. It's not to say any of those things. It's purely saying that when a mother and a father aren't together, There are
Mm.
things that that child has to go through. So it doesn't matter how much you provide to that child financially,
Hold on, your
right?
sound. There we go.
It doesn't matter how much you provide to that child financially or love wise, right? So let's take something like Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
That child has to split his Christmas, or the parents decides which child that person wants to, which parent is going to get the child for that day, right? That's
Yeah.
not something that the child wants to go through, and it's of no fault to the child. So
Okay.
these things begin to build certain things within the children, to include my own children, right? I'm not
Right.
with their
Right.
moms, right? So there's
Right.
certain things
That's why I
that
wanted
are
to ask.
missed,
I want to ask you because I think for me,
right?
if you were to ask me, Crystal, how could I reword it? I would say because obviously your children were in a single parent, we're in a broken family, right?
Right.
Because you got divorced. And I think sometimes if we're able to show people, this is one of the things that I've seen that's happened with my family. And although I
Mhm,
love my sons, they have an amazing mother. This
mhm.
has been my experience. And that way it doesn't feel so much, it doesn't feel so accusatory. It feels like, wow, I've learned a lesson going through this process, having children, getting married early, and I see how this has affected my family. And that all, when people can feel that personal connection and they can see that you're trying to help them through your experience as opposed to point out their flaws or
Well,
their
and that's the problem, right? So I can't control the fact that someone else says he was talking about me. I didn't mention your name. I don't know your situation. I don't even know that you have kids,
right.
right? So for you to just, self-actualize this comment to say, well, he was talking about me and what I'm going through,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do with that. And I guess this is where they say like Blake is going to be Blake, right? I don't mean anything by it, when I say it, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also willing to have the conversation. It is my experience. And then, as a single parent, whether you're the mom, the dad, whether you're the custodial parent or the non-custodial parent, like we all know that there are times when we have our children
Right.
and they're asking for that other parent for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's still something that that child has to go through. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that they're not going to be great. They're going to do well. They won't be productive members of society.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying that with me knowing that and having experienced that part, having another child and potentially being in that situation is not something that I would put myself in.
Mm-hmm. How has it been difficult? Let me ask you this, because I think this is also something that people need, women especially, need to hear. How has it been difficult personally for you as a dad, co-parenting? Like what maybe give us an example of something that's been difficult or, that's been a struggle, personal struggle for you,
Oh,
so that
it's
women
it's
can see men deal with that as well.
it's all difficult. I mean, not being able to pick my son up from school, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
of my sons whenever I feel like it, or sometimes not being able to make, certain events, or, my kids are a little, I'm fortunate that, my son's moms, my sons have dual families.
Right.
So I don't have any like single moms raising a kid, right?
Okay. Okay.
I definitely have to give my respect to the other men that are in my son's lives,
Nice.
and I definitely give leeway to those men to, have say so over my sons while they're
Mhm.
in their household,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of like a community parenting, if you will. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't stop me from, not wanting to be at certain events or being able to handle certain things, or being able to provide the insight that I would like to provide to my children on how to address a particular situation,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So it's just difficult all the way around, and I think it's what all dads experience, when they're not the custodial parent.
Yeah, that's that. And I don't think, Blake, that women often understand that, right?
Mhm.
I know for myself, I try to put myself in the situation so people can hear that I'm not accusing. I know as the mother that was the primary parent, to me, it seemed like my ex was having a great time. Like he
Right.
wasn't, I never thought until I got a little older, oh, that must be hard for him that he's not here. We live in a different state. He can't come to a soccer game, just up. So I think we have to share that. It's great for men to vocalize that so that people hear and women can
It,
be aware.
not just that. Let me add to that. It's also hard to discipline your children in these situations,
I was
right? Because what happens is, as a man, you want to discipline your son, but there's a fine line because the moms will only make the sons do so much. So you don't want to disrupt that relationship with your son to the fact that your son is saying, well, I don't want to go to my dad's house this weekend because they know they're going to get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And as the mom, you're like, oh, well, he doesn't want to go. So, I don't want to make him go. So,
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes along with that, some nuances that need to be worked out. And regardless of how good the parenting between the two people, it just will always be. And, you just have to find a way around it.
Yeah, but if you can't avoid it, I tell people I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I would not sign up for that again. I don't think there's anything wrong with anyone saying that
Right.
because it's difficult. It is difficult. Even in the best situations, it is difficult.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Definitely.
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you clearing that up. Okay, so Blake, let's get to these connections. I
Sure.
hate that we did not see anything. We didn't see hide nor hair of you and Cynthia at
No.
all.
Mm-mm.
What was okay? So let's talk about that one, since that one we don't know anything about. We saw Cynthia, we see her with Anthony and also Dre. And I definitely would have liked to see her with you. I think we probably would have got a different side of her. So
Right.
can you talk about that connection and what you guys experienced before it dissipated?
So we had a good connection. Cynthia is cool. It was the same energy, I guess, and likeness to what I have with Suan, as far as going out and the dates and, getting them gifts. Matter of fact, let me throw Suan under the bus right now, because Suan stated something that was inaccurate. So
Okay.
on the boat, by the time we did the boat scene, I was still connected with the both of them, and I bought each of them a bracelet.
Okay.
But they were not the same bracelets. I brought them two separate bracelets, right? So I saw an interview where Suan said that I bought them both the same bracelet, and that wasn't accurate.
Okay.
I think she forgot. It must have slipped her mind. But no, Cynthia is great. We have really good energy. We were rocking. I think for me, I think it's just a stages where people are within their lives, right? And Suan's a little older than Cynthia, and she's a little further along, right? Haven't been married and haven't had, those experiences. So, it was a hard one for me, but, I decided to lean the Suan way, over the Cynthia way for that reason.
Okay.
And then the ability to communicate and be on the same wavelength. I give Cynthia her flowers. I have nothing bad to say about Cynthia. It was a hard choice, right? Cynthia and I are still cool to this day.
Okay.
But you got to understand, you get 5 weeks to film the show when you have to make a decision, come week 3 over somebody that you may have talked to for like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Right. So, it was difficult, but, I'm happy where we are.
Okay. Before we move on to Suan, I want to second what Congo English said. I like Cynthia.
We're trying to avoid it.
this entire season. However, her baby's father, I hate the term baby's father, but her children's father.
The father of her children.
The father of her children was out of pocket.
Right.
Out of pocket, at least on this show. Now, I don't know if he was, prepped by production to do a little extra or what exactly happened. I don't know. You haven't seen a lot of the show. Did you hear about how that went down? Because it was extremely uncomfortable and it didn't come off well.
Even though I said I haven't watched the show, I've lived it and I've experienced it, right? So I know all of the things that have transpired and what has gone on. So I didn't have to see it. I think for Cynthia, my hat off to her. I think that she's at a point where she's growing in her life, and she has, some things that she's trying to progress in. And I think that this was just her attempt at, progressing and trying to pull her personal life and situation forward. So, I don't know really what to say about someone else's decisions. And, I can only speculate over, what's what when it comes to that. Yeah. But, it's a reality of her, and it's something that comes along with her and dealing with her, right? So I think it's always a consideration when you're dealing with a man or a woman with kids. You want to see, what's the relationship with that other person, and how much of a problem is that other person going to be in your dating life as you attempt to move forward. So while I think it was interesting, I also think it was fair, to present that.
Yeah, that's true. That's a realistic snapshot. So let me ask you this before we move there. Are you open to, because some people, once their children are of a certain age, and with you having a 23-year-old, how old are your 3 boys?
23, 15, and 10.
Oh, 10. Okay, so you got a little one yourself. So are you open to being a stepfather or being, you know, a bonus dad?
So I think, and I'm going to be truly transparent. I'm going to blame it on the alcohol right now, right? So this is just note. I've been drinking before I say what I'm about to say, so I need to be able to pull this back. But I think that what a lot of people, and I say people, I mean women, right? I think a lot of people don't recognize is a lot has to do with the relationship
Mm-hmm.
that you have with the father of your child and how involved that father is.
Right.
Twofold. Number one, how young is that child? So are we talking as if I'm starting from scratch? You have a 2-year-old, so now we need to go 16 years before we can get to a point where we have some type of freedom. So that's one question. Number two, how involved is the dad in your child's life? Is he providing physically? Is he providing that structure that that child needs, right? Like how much am I going to have to take on and stepping in? So
Right.
to answer your question, no, it is not a red flag for me. It's not a hard stop. No. But if you say, well, the woman has 3 kids, she has no financial support, the kids are 2 and 3 years old, right? It has nothing to do with her kids or her situation. It has to do with the fact that that goes totally left from where I see my life going or how I want to live my life, right? So that's the bigger part. The kids are never the issue.
Right. No, that's and that's fair. That is fair. Most of us, as you said, women, when we get to a certain point, nobody, you know, if your children are grown, the idea of dating someone with very small children is something that you really have to be honest about.
Right.
Am I at a place in my life where I want to be changing diapers, or do I want to be able to get up and go? So
Right.
that's just real. And I think
And that's what I got crucified for, right? I said on the show, I said I rather when I say I said I prefer to save for retirement than college fund.
right.
Yeah, and people were upset about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people understood. I think sometimes people get emotionally triggered based on where they are in their life.
Right.
So, you know, okay. So you and Cynthia had a connection. It didn't go the entire way. Let's talk about Sue, because we had Sue on, and we've seen some of Sue Ann's interviews.
Right.
It doesn't really seem, Blake, like you guys are still together, even though I did see, you know, there have been couples on Ready to Love that when one is sent home and the other self-eliminates and they ride off into the sunset, namely Cornelius and Camille, right? So when I first saw you come sit down with Tommy, I was like, okay, maybe they really do have a real connection, and maybe Blake is going to ride off into the sunset with Sue. But Sue's energy did not suggest that. So
Okay.
we're going to ask you, how did that connection go, and where did it end, to the point where you felt like you wanted to self-eliminate after she left?
So Susu and I connected on the show, and unfortunately, you know, production, in my opinion, didn't do a good job of really showing our story. Right? It was actually just the opposite. They would not send us on dates. Right? So Sue and I began, you know, dating off the show.
Okay.
Right? And we began establishing this relationship, and she's actually great, and you know, she's a little awkward at times when it comes to the interviews, right? But you know, we connected when I knew that she was being eliminated, right? I packed our stuff, I put our keys up. I don't think they showed it. I didn't watch it, but I didn't hear anything about it. When they did her elimination and she said bye to me and I gave her a kiss, I told her to make dinner reservations for 9 o'clock.
No, we
right?
definitely want to see that.
Once they went ahead and did the elimination, I left 30 minutes after she did. We went to dinner, we went to Atlanta, like we kept it pushing. So I think that's that part. I think that she and I just handle pressure, you know, a little differently. And I think it just comes across sometimes, you know, a little unsure, so to speak.
Okay.
As far as the, you know, the continued relationship and the continuation of the relationship, you know, you have to wait for the reunion to see,
Yeah.
you know, what happened there.
Okay.
But, lots of love for Sue Ann.
Can you tell us what it was? Because like you said, we didn't see any of you guys dates, which is odd, right? Because you, Blake, you were in the bottom most of the time, right? So I think we wanted to see, what was happening.
Again, so this was production, right? So let's think about it like this. Jeffrey and Morgan spoke the loudest. So because they spoke the loudest, they kind of took over for the vocal position of the women. But
Hmm.
the reality is all the women did not feel like they wanted me to go home.
Okay.
Otherwise I would have went home.
True.
Right. We had a lifeline and the lifeline was used for Mark Anthony, not for
Hmm.
me. Right. So I think that that was just a part of the creativity of production,
Right.
to keep the villain, going,
Hmm.
and to keep that moving along. Because outside of, Cynthia, I have a great, even to this day, I'm great with Marcia, I'm great
Hmm.
with Mercedes, right? We don't have any beef. It's all love. So it wasn't everyone that shared that sentiment, but
Right.
I think production just over pushed it to kind of keep it going.
Yeah. Well, actually, and I wanted to ask you this, and I saw this in the chat also. It seemed like on the trip, it seemed like you and Morgan were fine. Like it didn't seem like she was breathing fire
So
towards you anymore. Like what was that?
So Morgan approached me right before we got to the house. I think when we did like the airboat thing,
Mhm.
she approached me and we kind of talked. And then I remember when we got to the house, and again they didn't show this part, right? I was sitting on the couch and she came and she laid on me and she was like, Blake, did you ever think we would be like this, right? So I
Wow.
thought it was funny after I was like, after you just blasted me, I was like, make sure you keep the same energy all the way through, the rest of the episodes. When she went through the drama with Tony and Lyndon, she came and cried on my shoulder. I gave her, a little bit of advice, over that situation.
Mhm.
But I have no beef with Morgan, quite honestly. I think it was just a situation where, she probably should have talked to me before making her decision on what she thought her truth and where she thought she should stand.
Yeah.
But I'm not mad at her for it.
Yeah.
It's just something that happened.
Well, you're very mature, Blake, but that was a lot. Her calling you a malignant cancer was a
Cancer.
lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it though, right? When someone has that type of energy, what can you say to them? Honestly, like what could you really say that's going to the person doesn't want to have a conversation. They don't want to feel better. They don't want anything other than to vent. So I gave her an opportunity to vent. And once she got it out, we can move on.
Yeah. No, I kudos to you because there are a lot of things that other people would have said, man or woman. I
Mhm.
think being insulted like that, male or female, might have had a different response. So kudos
So
to you for keeping it.
I think that's something from the outside. I wasn't insulted by it at all. I
You
wasn't
were insulted
insulted,
by it.
not
Really?
at all. Because there's no number one, there's no truth to it,
Right.
right? She doesn't know me. We've never had a conversation, right? So it's like a stranger walking up to you in the street and telling you about yourself, right? Why
They're doing
why
it
feel away?
They're doing it on camera in front of a national audience. You're right, Blake. You're absolutely right, but it's it's on the Oprah Winfrey Network. So
Right.
it's a little bit
And
much.
with that being said, even after she did what she did, they
Mhm.
didn't say, oh wow, she told Blake about himself.
Right. No.
They said, look at how this woman is making herself look on TV.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't take offense to that. I mean, you gotta remember, love her to death, but this is the same person who she said putting the hair in someone's hair, right? Like, I'm good. I like my hair. Like, I want to keep my hair. Like, you know what I mean? Like, some battles just aren't worth fighting. You got to pick and
Right.
choose the battles, and that just wasn't
Right.
one worth fighting.
No, that's very mature, and I agree. But if that
But
had
not
been
to.
my brother or somebody, I'd been like, okay, no, you're
Oh
not gonna
no, don't get it twisted. Now my friends want to hold it like my female friends want a whole another zone.
already
They was
know.
like, let me get her number. What's her IG? Right. That was different. But no, for me it was nothing. It was nothing.
Right. Well, I have to ask you this because I really, although I haven't, I don't stand for some of the behavior. I don't condone some of the behavior that has happened. And I usually don't say anything. I usually let the guests talk. But I have to mention this because I thought it was such a horrible example of manhood. And I do think we have to be honest about something like that. Seeing the way Tony and Lyndon kind of used Morgan as a like a opportunity to show who was the toughest and the man, like making the wager back and forth. Oh
Okay.
well, if Marcia was here, you could have had her. And then
Right.
how do you feel when you watch me kiss her? That was really really low, and I feel like it was distasteful to show that. And then even all the way through to the last men's lounge where we
Mhm.
saw Tony acknowledge that he had been intimate with another cast member that had already been home.
Right.
I just, I have to ask you as a man who's done a great job this season of holding himself, in high regard and being respectful. What was your thought process on, did you see that interaction?
I did. I
And how
did.
did you feel at that moment? Because that was really a lot for us to watch.
I did. So there's a couple of things there for me. I feel like Morgan was wrong. I feel like Morgan could have shut the situation down real early once the first comment was made from Tony
Okay.
to Lyndon. But I think that, for whatever reason she didn't. I don't want to speculate why she didn't. She didn't shut it down and she allowed it to go. Tony, no beef with Tony. Tony is Tony. He moves how he moves. He's a particular type of guy, right? Lyndon is a particular type of guy. And they're two totally different types of guys. People like what they like. Morgan likes the high energy, firecracker, outspokenness that Tony is. Lyndon literally is like the coolest dude you will ever meet. When I tell you Lyndon is funny, he's laid back, but he's that nice guy that we always talk about that gets overlooked, because he's a nice guy. And within the cast, when we talk about like tops and bottoms, number ones and number twos, like all of the cast, we know who each other's people are, right? So for my square, it was me, Anthony, Cynthia, and Suanne. Anthony and Suanne had just as much of a connection as Cynthia and I had, and it was just kind of the four of us. We all know it, like we all move accordingly, and we're all respectful of each other, while we're dating. I just think that for Tony, I think for who he is, it probably was a lot that Morgan would even consider someone else. And I think for Lyndon, it was a lot that Lyndon was trying to let Tony have it. And Tony wouldn't just let it be. So, I hate to say it, but I don't know. I don't personally fault Lyndon because Lyndon just had a conversation and he just brought up something that was. I didn't find it as a violation or any of those things because he let so much ride before he decided to just say, this is what it is, right? There's one thing to be a man and to have patience and to demonstrate grace, but there's something else when someone is overstepping boundaries. For me, Lyndon was just addressing a boundary that was overstepped.
Okay, that's fair. You were there and you saw everything. It
was hilarious though. Let me tell you, being there, it was hilarious. I tried to put the napkin up. I was trying to cover my face. Like it was hilarious.
But you can't say, because you were able to hold your cool, and it might not have been emotional for you at all. But I don't think it's fair to say that it was totally Morgan's fault for how both Tony and Lyndon.
See, see, I didn't say it was totally Morgan's fault. What I said was, I feel like Morgan could have stepped in and stopped it.
Okay.
When Tony started talking about where she was sleeping for the night and the fact that he kissed her, she could have easily just said, all right, Tony, didn't even have to be on camera. She could have whispered in his ear, you're my first pick and I think you're doing too much, and left it at that. But I think that she may have been, enjoying it or basking in whatever it was because she said nothing through. The only time she had a problem was when Marcia was brought up. Now you have a problem, but you didn't have a problem that, these two guys were sitting here, not being the most cordial to each other during the dinner.
Right. Okay. I had to ask you about that because that was shocking. I will say, I'm not going to ask you, but I will say I do think that, and I guess Natasha was a part of the show, so I guess that probably is why her name wasn't bleeped out. But I thought that was extremely disrespectful to bring somebody else.
What?
That was horrible.
But I think under the circumstances of the relationship that they have, I don't think it's disrespectful. I think certain people. I mean, we all know people that require more energy, in their relationships to keep those relationships going, and I think that's what this is. And that's the total opposite of Lyndon. Lyndon actually came to each person. They didn't show it, but he came to each person after the scene and apologized, for the way that he behaved. So, shout out to Lyndon.
I meant Tony bringing up, actually Morgan and Tony bringing up the entanglement with Natasha.
Right. And that's what I was saying in the beginning, right? Some people need energy, right? They bond over these types of situations, right? I mean, we all know people. We have people in our families who, it's crazy, but they've been through the most stuff, right? They probably stabbed each other, cut each other up, right? Threw each other stuff out, and they've been
Right.
together for 45 years,
Right.
right?
Right.
Whereas your girlfriend or the other person likes somebody's picture on social media and the relationship is over,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
don't knock their relationship for what it is. If it works for them, it's just not something that I would, entertain.
Got it. Well, I can't. That I get you 100%, Blake.
Mhm.
I'm glad we had a chance to hear your perspective. Is there anything that you learned about yourself through this process? I mean, the entire thing, the dating, and then meeting different people, and then hearing the conversation brought back to you, and then of course the reunion. Any lesson that you would take, or thing that you learned about yourself in this process?
Um, Not from the woman's standpoint necessarily, but definitely from a dating standpoint of, you know, having conversations with women about dating.
Mm-hmm.
And as a man, you never get to see the man to the left or to the right of you that's dating the same woman or interested in the same woman. So this was very eye-opening, for me. And, I have so many questions, right? So many conversations to be had over, all of these scenarios and the things that happen. But yeah, that was definitely eye-opening for me.
Okay, so we don't know if you're still in your connection is still going on, but moving forward with dating, is there anything that you will do differently based on this experience and witnessing, like you just said, all that going on, that you don't always have a bird's eye view to?
I think that I trust, I think I trust, my approach.
Hmm.
I think I trust, everything. Based off of, like the Morgans and the Jeffries and stuff like that, right? At this stage of my life, I try to do my best to choose and not be chosen. And I think that's what I've learned, into my 40s. I did a lot of allowing people to choose me,
Hmm.
or telling people what I wanted, and then that person would act out, who it is. So that's why I come across, a little bit more reserved, because I don't
Hmm.
want to tell you what it is that I'm looking for. I want to know who it is that you are, right?
Hmm.
And then we can kind of go from there. So I think that's the biggest piece for me. That's the biggest piece for me.
Okay. All right. Someone asked, did you have a podcast out? Do you have a podcast out? And if
I
so,
do. I do. So content will be coming within the next week or two. The podcast is called Gentleman's Code.
nice. Okay.
And as we get closer, it's already stood up. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
And as we get closer, I'll be, sharing the links and the information on my IG. And,
Okay.
my IG is champ_Fenimore, FENIMORE.
Okay, hold on, Blake. I'm gonna have you spell that again so I can put it in
Sure.
the chat. Champ underscore.
Champ_Fenimore,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
FENIMORE.
Okay.
And the podcast is called Gentleman's Code
I
on
just
YouTube.
I just put that in the chat. So you guys, Heal Together says she's gonna find herself a Blake. Well, good luck, girl. Make sure that you follow Champ Fenimore and definitely subscribe to Gentleman's Code. Blake, thank you so much for being a great example of that tonight. I've enjoyed our conversation and you clearing up some of the questions that we had. But you carried yourself like a true gentleman, and we all appreciate that.
Thank you for having me at any time. Don't forget the reunion. I didn't watch the episodes, but I will be watching the reunion. So the reunion is worth watching. So we can talk again after the reunion.
Yes, and let's do a joint broadcast with Gentleman's Code. We can do that. That would
Definitely.
be fun. That would be fun.
Definitely. We can do
Okay.
it.
All right.
All
I
right.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Great interview, you guys. I definitely am going to reach back out to him and see if we can get, actually, I'm going to see if I can get him to come on for one of the conversations about the book, Dear Alpha Female. Make sure that you like and subscribe and share this interview so others can hear from the horse's mouth himself. And we'll be back, hopefully with Lyndon. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.